There we go. Right, OK, we raised a point a few days ago that the MOD had allowed military family accommodation to deteriorate to such an extent that sleeping bags were being issued to help families get through winter due to faulty heating. Videos uploaded by soldiers also flooded social media showing leaking ceilings, broken windows and floor-to-ceiling mould, which I think we can all agree is absolutely shocking, which is apparently causing viral infections in children. All of this is occurring while our servicemen and women are being expected to cover for striking workers over Christmas. Earlier today, we spoke to former Royal Navy nuclear submarine commander Ryan Ramsey, and he had this to say. He says it's an absolute scandal, shockingly handled by Pinnacle and the MOD, who should have intervened way earlier. I lived in married quarters when I was commander, and the state of them then in 2008 wasn't great. So with little investment and poor management, it's absolutely unsurprising that here we are. That company mentioned by Commander Ryan Ramsey there, Pinnacle, whose boss earns a tidy £320,000 a year. 320 grand a year. I was going to say I'm not sure anyone deserves that. I think some people do, but I'm not sure it's this guy. Anyway, we're awarded a £144 million contract in March to sort out the military's housing issues. Well, after a bit of digging, it turns out that the company has not only completely failed to fulfil its very lucrative contract, but they also, get a load of this, people, have some Chinese connections. There you go. One of the directors of Pinnacle's parent company is a Chinese national based in China. He's named as the person of significant control, the only one, in fact, which means he has more than 25% of shares and or voting rights and the power to appoint the board of directors. Now, we're not suggesting explicitly that there's anything untoward going on here, of course not. But should it be government policy to be handing out defence contracts to Chinese-affiliated companies? We've got William Clouston here, leader of the Social Democratic Party, to talk about what the Tories and the MOD are getting wrong here and what the SDP would like to see done with the treatment of our servicemen and women. William, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Rather a long introduction there, but hey, better to get it all out. First and foremost, we are seriously letting down our armed forces personnel. They are living in squalid conditions and the government doesn't seem to care.
Yeah, this is a scandal, an absolute scandal. These are people who've served the country. There were some cases in the newspapers and online. A gentleman, William Matthews, who'd served in Afghanistan, Iraq and Bosnia, and he's been complaining for months, literally months, about the quality of his accommodation. Nothing gets done. And I'm afraid, Patrick, it's the same old story with the successive governments, Tory and Labour, outsourcing. They prefer to outsource than doing anything directly. And I just don't believe that this model works, this constant outsourcing of services and facilities. Originally, actually, in 96, when the largest part of the estate was basically hived off, the National Orders Office complained then, a few years later, that basically the MOD, the Tory government at the time, had made a loss that amounted to several billion selling the thing off. And now they can't even look after the accommodation properly. And families have been given, as you say, sleeping bags and instructed to sleep in their overcoats. It's a scandal.
No, it is, absolutely. But when you look at the kind of juxtaposition, I mean, I was just spoken there about the fact that we're allegedly paying £64,000 a year per migrant. Now, OK, fine, I wish it wasn't a binary choice, but it does appear to be, because we are going to have a situation in this country, are we not, where disused military barracks are being used to house migrants, people who've just come over the channel. Meanwhile, people who've actually served for Queen, now King and country, maybe have fallen on hard times, will be zipping up the sleeping bag on the pavement outside, and that's just not right.
No, it's right, and it sickens the public, this sort of thing, Patrick. I mean, people, there used to be a concept of contribution, right? You paid in and you got out. We looked after our own people. Now, as you say, you've got illegal migrants coming in and, the government's spending $6 million a day, $7 million a day on expensive accommodation in hotels. And those hotels are very warm. And we've got people, as you say, there's a major problem of homelessness among veterans. We, in our party, we have a policy to prioritise military veterans in housing anyway. But meanwhile, they can't even get the basics right. These are the basics, not having mould and damp as you say, some of the kids, Matthew's own child, is in an unheated room, in a cot in an unheated room. It's just totally unacceptable. Meanwhile, Pinnacle.
I'm just going to say, I'm just interrupting you, William, just quickly, because we're playing some pictures now, and I know we have a lot of listeners on radio, right? And what you've just seen there, I just want to talk people through it, is a ceiling that's completely caved in with water pouring through it, and that water is going from what appears to be the loft all the way down through the bedroom floor, down into the kitchen, down into the hallway. And I wish this was an isolated incident, but right now we have a situation, William, where if you go away and serve king and country, your wife or husband, whatever, and kids may well be getting ill off the damp in the house that the military is providing you, or the government is providing you. Meanwhile, I'm sorry, but it's the most obvious example, though. It is, right? You have people in four-star hotels who've just come across the channel.
It's a scandal. I mean, this is the problem. I've got family members, a number of family members that have been in married quarters accommodation. This is a couple of decades ago, and they used to be perfectly fine. And the problem is, Patrick, that the model is wrong. The government is obsessed with selling all of our assets off. As you say, many of these assets have been sold to foreign investors. The purpose then isn't actually looking after the assets and looking after the families that live in the houses. The prime purpose of these companies is to enrich their shareholders. And I think there's a major problem here. Direct service provision is far more efficient than subcontracting and outsourcing all of these things. It just doesn't work. It's a model which has failed.
Yeah, and just talk to me a bit about the problem with outsourcing it. I mean, I seem to remember one time it was almost a question as to whether or not we were going to be outsourcing various different nuclear plants to the Chinese. I mean, now it's our military accommodation as well. But Huawei. I mean, the thing is, we know, right, that the Chinese government does not mean us well. I have gone on record and said I really seriously do not think that the Chinese government means the world particularly well, given certain things that have happened in recent years. And now here we have a situation where supposedly China or Chinese-run firms, which is perfectly within our rights to question where this money is going, right? Could well be in control of a lot of our military accommodation. Why are we doing this? What's wrong with giving it to Jones Homes or someone?
Well, because the people that govern us have no concept of national interest, Patrick. That's why. I gave a speech in 2019 describing the decision, the prospect that the 5G network would be sold off to Huawei. I said that was insane. I described it as insane. I think it's ludicrous. It's taken the Tories about 5 or 10 years to catch up with reality. I mean, we're not well governed, I'm afraid. Until you get a government that's prepared actually to put the country first and not sell everything off, not hive everything off. But housing is a disgrace anyway, just on a wider point. We've had the little child, 3-year-old child in Rochdale died as a result of mould on the walls. And again, the SDP, we've thought about this. We have a policy, basically, you have a housing MOT, effectively, a condition certificate. And if you don't have that certificate, you can't charge rent. And I think landlords would very rapidly realise that you cannot put people into substandard accommodation and take rent.
Yeah, can I just ask, because just before we move on to something else, but I'm keen to get your views on it, and we've kind of led the discussion in this way, actually, albeit accidentally, but do you feel as though we're just being eaten alive with absolute, complete and utter woke tosh? I mean, I can't help but feel, for example, today, right, I saw a couple of things, actually, around the Muswell Hill area in London, in North London. Nice area, lots of money, putting about in Muswell Hill. People doing rather well for themselves in the Muswell Hill area. There's a primary school there which has got all of the flags of the World Cup playing nations, and next to the Saudi Arabian flag, they've put the trans and the gay pride flag. Now, forgive me, I don't remember the trans and the gay pride team actually rocking up at the World Cup, but there we go. And then just a bit down the road, there's a hotel that's been used to house asylum seekers. Now, those asylum seekers, channel migrants, are being relocated from there to a disused military barracks. Oh, the protests up in arms. I'm sorry, but is this just kind of like white, rich guilt?
A lot of these things, Patrick, just don't make any sense at all. A lot of the alliances that these ultra-progressives have are actually completely incompatible. My friend and SDP colleague Rod Little has once said that, yes, you can have the gay pride flag, whatever, but try and organise a gay pride rally in Ramallah. And see how that goes. I mean, honestly, I'm afraid until we start defending Western civilization and Britain and our own values and our own traditions, we won't get anywhere. But unfortunately, we're governed by people that are completely indifferent to these things.
William, thank you very much. Always an absolute pleasure. That's William Clouston there, of course. Oh, the SDP. Right, what do you make of all that, ladies and gentlemen? I've got to tell you what, I've got an absolute load.